Welcome to the panel discussion for the Exam Security Summit. I'm Radhika, and today we are getting into one of the most urgent challenges in the assessment world right now, what I'd call the Gen AI cheating shift. Few years ago, cheating was largely an individual act, one person, one device, and one moment of panic. What we are dealing with now is fundamentally different. AI tools that work in real time, coordinated answers shared at scale, and evasion techniques that are genuinely hard to see. The controls the industry spent decades building were not actually designed or prepared for what is happening in the world right now. At Talview, we work with the organizations like the ones represented on this panel, and what we are seeing is that the old model of detecting malpractice in the act has fundamentally broken down. The shift we are focused now is moving from isolated event based detection to pattern intelligence, reading behaviors across sessions. That's the lens I wanted to bring in today's discussion and conversation. I'm joined by three people who are living this problem across language certification, employment assessments, and large scale awarding programs. Before we dive in, I'd love each of you to introduce yourself in your own words. Jarret, let's start with you, followed by Dan and Michael.
Well, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Jarret Dyer. I'm the Vice President of Test Security at Surpass Assessments. I've also worked in the higher ed space for over 20 years. And so today I'll be bringing what we've been seeing with GenAI and assessment forward.
Thanks, Jarret. Dan?
Hello, everyone. So I'm Dan Hughes. I'm Vice President of Product Development at Talogy and a chartered psychologist. I've been working in the field for around 27 years, specifically focused really on talent assessment and development, so covering things like pre-employment hiring and then use of assessments for leadership and people development as well.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks. Michael Nemarich, Chief Operating Officer at NAATI. We're the accreditation authority for translators and interpreters in Australia and New Zealand. We tested in 98 languages last year, and all of them online. So it's been a huge shift, as you've said, Radhika, in the last couple of years of how people are trying to attempt to get around controls.
Thanks. This is great. We are coming from different worlds, but I think in today's conversation, we are going to find out a lot of common ground. We'll start with the big picture. So I want to hear from each of you separately. Michael, we'll start with you. NAATI has been running these exams for a long time. When you look at the cheating, what cheating looked like 2 years ago versus what it looks like today, what's actually different, and what's the shift that you are seeing that you weren't seeing before?
Sure. I think it's worth pointing out, as you've mentioned, I think already, people have always tried to cheat. It's just the method in which they're doing it. And even, I think in the last 2 years, what we've seen is more advanced technologies in there, but it's still got a human component. I think that's probably worth pointing out as well. The most, almost hilarious comment is this year we've seen a group of people start trying to wear wigs to cheat, which doesn't sound like much until you realize they're wearing AirPods with live translation functions on it for our interpreting tests. So some of the methods are crude, like wearing very ill-fitting wigs, but that technology that they've got in the background that's supporting them is quite challenging for us. I think that the rapidness of it and the discreteness of it, I think the discreteness of it's really the thing that's standing out to me at the moment. Quite small devices and text appearing on screen that's sort of trying to get around screen share software.
That's a very interesting take, Michael. Before we deep dive into this, I'd love to hear from Dan and Jarret as well. Dan, the hiring assessment world has always had the challenges of being remotely and largely unmonitored. So, how has the context changed now that everyone has AI on their phones is readily available?
Yeah, sure. And I'd probably echo some of Michael's points there, that I think cheating actually has not been, has always been there in certainly in the talent assessment space since the time that we went online. So it's always been possible, but Gen AI has provided a a new, very sophisticated avenue for people to gain an advantage. So that's what's really changing, I think, is the nature and opportunity that's there. So it's a form of cheating that someone can do alone, so they don't have to necessarily admit to anyone else that they're cheating. Psychologically, that's, I think, relevant. And as Michael mentioned, some of the technology that is available is getting very sophisticated at analyzing problems, providing solutions to things. And there's a tool that I find quite interesting on online site called Humanity's Last Exam that you might have come across, which is this set of very complex, sophisticated questions that experts have said across hundreds of subjects. And it's been really interesting to see, they sort of benchmark all these large language models against it, and just to see the pace of the improvement is quite striking. So I was looking back at so ChatGPT 4.0 at the end of 2024 was only getting 2.7% correct. Now 5.2 at the end of 2025 was getting about 30% correct. So that it's the speed at which the technology is improving, I think, and it does create some particular challenges in the talent assessment space, I think, because that's operated very much on a trust first policy. There's not been a high level of proctoring. Most of it has been remote and unsupervised, and I think this is really affecting how organizations are thinking about it.
Got it, Dan. So similarly for you, Jarret, I think you work across a lot of different programs and exam types. Hearing what Michael and Dan have shared, do you see same patterns across these certification programs? And from your vantage point, what feels genuinely new about the moment versus cheating challenges that the industry has always faced?
Yeah, again, I'll say the same exact thing. You know, cheating has been around for thousands of years. I think what is fundamentally different now is we often, before, we're just either, you know, we're kind of looking at somebody was bringing in something unauthorized that benefit them on an assessment, or they were trying to remove it for the benefit of somebody else. We're kind of looking at those those streams as separate. And now, with the technology, with the tools, with the meta glasses that I'm wearing now, right, it's very easy to not only be harvesting that content, saving it in a file, but at the same time sending those picture files out to, you know, an LLM, having them answer it, come back through a Bluetooth device and give you answers in real time, all independently, and through an app that maybe you vibe coded by yourself for 25 minutes the night before. We're seeing now with smart devices more than ever pure abilities to lock down some of our lockdown browsers and our other security systems, because they're not based on the system. But even those that are, agentic AI has now allowed us not only, you know, before it was like you had a cheat sheet and you looked up the answers, or maybe you got it, or you're really sophisticated and you had some kind of wireless device and you had a proxy feeding you the answers, but you were still engaged in it, right? Now we're seeing literally a student can fall asleep and amazingly the computer is still populating answers, right? Because on the back end, they've, frankly, some of the codes are very sophisticated but very simple, that allow for bypass, even right when the network card and the Wi-Fi card are technically turned off. We're kind of seeing things quite more in depth. And the other part, I think the assessment industry kind of globally is also in an interesting space, because I was tracking the academic integrity conversations, and prior, I think, to the pandemic, we had a lot of conversations about essay mills. Essay mills really never hit the US as much as I know they hit colleagues in Europe and in Australia in the higher ed space, right? Where you would find students paying people to write papers for them. The assessment space is a little bit different than that. So we widely hadn't seen the bad actors involved in that space in our space. However, ChatGPT came along, essay mills pretty much went defunct because you could write your paper by yourself, right? So then where's that new revenue stream? Wow, we now have something that can allow us to proxy test for a whole different market. And so I find it very interesting. A lot of, I call the bargain basement, like the cheaper, more malicious software packages that are being offered out there, are all routing back to the same general areas where those essay mills had proliferated previously. So it's the same bad actors, but now in a different space. In the assessment space, I didn't honestly, we were used to, some of corporate companies kind of coming in, but weren't really looking at some of these really bad actors. So my plug with this is what we've then also seen beyond generative AI is those who engage in these cheating services are now reporting that they're also getting extorted, right? So pay $130 to help someone proxy on your test for you or use their AI bot to do it. You pass, you get the job that you want, you go see Dan, you're hired, and all of a sudden they're telling you need like 750 US, or they're going to let all the parties know that you cheated on your test.
That is true. That is very true. Just deep diving into that, Jarret, I think what you mentioned in similar context, what about like content leakage as well, right? I mean, answer key leakage, coordinated sharing online. It's surprising to see how many Telegram groups are running which are selling the answer keys online. And how do you handle those situations?
So that's a great question. And in many ways, I would say from that perspective, from a test security perspective, we're operating the same way that we have before, right? So what I like to tell in these talks is there's so much of a narrow focus just on generative AI. And it can be like kind of scary because it's nebulous, right? But the way that we approach all of the threats really hasn't changed. It's awareness. It's making sure that in person, that IDs are checked appropriately, that proctors are changed online, that proctors are changed, that technology is still continuously evolving. And I think that's the biggest key right there. It did feel that as for some awarding bodies, it's like we were in the past, we were able to check some boxes and say we're secure. Now, if you don't have someone that's on Telegram, on Reddit, like I do pretty much every night, then you're just not staying. It's almost like fashion trends. Like you have to stay in the know with how these things are evolving. Back to Dan's point, 4.0 to 5.2.
Right.
If you haven't like asked the same questions of ChatGPT, you need to, because you need to know what a curious cheat adjacent individual that's on the fence about cheating is able to do. Case in point, I'm not a coder, but I'm code curious, right? I'm an ethical cheater. So what I try to do is try to see what people can do with the basic amount of knowledge and tools. 6 months ago, I spent 6 hours and a lot of foul language with ChatGPT trying to code out a cheating app, and we kept getting it wrong, right? And little things, if you understand how LLM, like, have really, got into them, like, they would give me a bunch of code for Python, and then it would say, put it in this folder. For example, cheat my test. And 3 hours later, we had a problem with the code, and it rewrote that I had to put it in a folder called cheat the test. And if you're a coder, cheat my test and cheat the test, they don't go to the same place. But for an LLM, it makes perfect sense, right? At least it did for 4.0. Or actually, I think this was later. This was like 5.0. Fast forward to a week ago, I forgot my cheating laptop for a presentation at home. I had to recreate this code to cheat, to give a demonstration to individuals. It took me 25 minutes to do the same exact thing, and it worked flawlessly. So we went from 6 hours to 25 minutes in a 4-month span. That tells me that the candidates that are as curious about doing that and the operators working out of Africa and the Middle East are right in step in the same way. So we need to be right there with them.
Got it. I think that is a very interesting take. But one follow-up question on that, Jarret, is what is the kind of cheating pattern that is really hard to detect in today's world, given with all the lockdown browsers, proctors available? What would be that one thing that you think is really genuinely hard to detect right now?
So yeah, a lot of these AI assisted apps that are very sophisticated at bypassing many of the current standard lockdown browsers on the market. I've seen multiple recordings of sessions. 3 proctors are staring at an individual, and it's something is happening. You cannot truly detect what it is because the app is running invisibly. It's copying and pasting in a very minute way. Some of these software, they'll take a writing sample of the student beforehand, or a cadence, and so when they're not just copying and pasting an entire essay, right, it literally is going at the speed of which the student had or the candidate had presented before. So that's where proctor training comes in, because honestly, as humans, we're not machines. It's great in every single one of these situations. Like, the fingers don't align, like so someone's pinky kept hitting the enter button over and over and over again, because this is all they were doing while they were it was happening in the background. So there are certainly tells, but if you're not trained to do so, and this is why we've been pushing proctor training in person and online so heavily, there are some things that you can look out for. The other half is people get bored. We had two situations, 10 minutes in, they were locked on, man, and then all of a sudden they start like the test is still going. I'm like, there's a PR tell right there. So in situations like that, flags, and then on the back end, it's the data, right? I think that, and thank you for bringing that up, because that's one of the most important things. If you don't have a fairly robust data stream in person and online, some of these things you're gonna miss. And it's not like, it's the age old, why didn't you change in the US? Why didn't you change like your grade from an F to like a C+? You might have gotten away with that, but everybody goes from the F to the A, the highest score, right? So it's the same. You had a 19 on this particular assessment a month ago, and now you got a 99 out of 100. There's no way. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that is true. I think the way we need to look at it is more from a signal perspective, how signals match on what you see on screen, what is actually happening behind the scene. We'll talk about that a bit more. Michael, a similar question for you. AI is actually genuinely capable of translations now. Now, when a candidate's performance could plausibly be AI assisted, how do you approach determining what's real? And what's the broader consequence if the credentials get through that shouldn't have gotten through in the first place?
I'll start with the consequence. Human lives are at risk when interpreters don't know what they're doing. So that's why we're super committed to making sure that people don't get through. I think it's multi-layered though as well. The benefit we have at the moment, which is our advantage, is rapidly eroding as these technologies improve. But it's not good at all languages. That's the start. So 98 languages last year for us. It's excellent at Spanish. It's excellent at Mandarin. It's starting to get worse as you go down the list of languages and the numbers of speakers. So we've definitely got an advantage in that. A large amount of our tests are oral, so interpreting tests. It's not good with accent. It's not good with voice recognition. And how many times does Siri get basic commands wrong? Like, I know it's improving, but I think that's, for us, part of the struggle, I guess, or the arms race is, we do, the big thing for us is new material, lots of new material all the time. And the benefit of that is, people haven't been able to train it on things. And that, I think, very much, as Jarret said as well, you're looking for those human signs as well. So we've got decades of data of what pass rates look like. As soon as you start seeing upticks in certain language groups, you know that there's maybe a tool that's being used out there, and that's something to look at. We actually just introduced to our terms and conditions last week, if we have a gut feel something is wrong, we will do a live interview with you. So we can't pin it. We're watching the screen. We've got all these amazing human exam invigilators and proctors, and they know something's wrong. It's the cadence, the voice, it's the speed of the answer. We don't really know. So we're just going to do a live interview. And that's how we're going to sort of, it's always an evolution, I guess, but that's something that's not going to be as easy to trip.
That is correct. So it sounds like that the signals that we were talking about during exam becomes very important for you as well. Response patterns, consistency across your spoken and written tests. Is that the direction that you are leaning to as well, right?
Yep.
Correct. Moving on to Dan. Then there's an argument that I've been hearing a lot in the industry is that using AI effectively is itself a valuable workplace skill now, right? And maybe we should be assessing candidates on how well they are able to use it rather than trying to catch them using it. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic to explore. I think there's some genuine tension right now in terms of certainly when I look at pre-employment testing around this issue. So I think for tests that have been designed and developed to be completed without GenAI use, there's still this sort of need to try and maintain and ensure the security, I think, of those assessments. But when you look at how as we talked about, how the technology is advancing so rapidly, it always feels like a bit of an arms race around it. I think this point about recognizing that many roles will be performance in that role will be drawing on someone's ability to use GenAI. It kind of makes sense to sort of shift thinking to how we can develop assessments that can effectively incorporate that in the process. Because it's a view certainly in the sort of talent assessment space. I think the fear has been will the wider use of GenAI and cheating lower the validity of the assessments, the predictiveness in the workplace. But there is this other side that actually, if we can capture the assessment of someone using these skills, those are skills that will be very important for the job as well. But I do think we need to be thinking about how we design assessments that are designed from that principle, rather than maybe saying let's take a reasoning test, a cognitive ability test that we had already, and okay, if they use GenAI and do well, that tells us something, but it's not telling us necessarily about their own cognitive capabilities. So I think designing assessments that specifically are intended to look at GenAI use, and I think you get into some interesting design questions there, like as we even think about it, do you allow people to use whatever GenAI tools are at their disposal? There's such a variety. You pay more, you can get more capable tools, or do you try and maybe embed a GenAI tool within an assessment and have them using it so you can actually sort of observe how they use it to support in the answers that they come up with, or how they solve the problem. Of course, I wouldn't rule out them using something else, but it would then be a bit more visible if they're not really using the tool directly that's embedded in the assessment to solve the problem. So yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and I think it's very much the way it will go. I think that will have to be a sort of area of skill set that is tested for people coming into roles.
That's correct. That's a great way to look at it. I mean, there are some recent research and reports where there were interviewers were given some answers given by ChatGPT versus written by human completely themselves, and a lot of scenarios, the interviewers ended up favoring the codes or the codes written by ChatGPT rather than the ones written by actual human, which kind of penalizes the honest candidates. So we need to look at the shift, and we need to look at how we can incorporate both of the things as well. All right. The next question that I want to ask is to all three of you. So across your respective spaces, employers, be it regulators, certification boards, where do you feel the awareness of the Gen AI cheating challenge is still lagging, and what's the biggest blind spot and how the industry is responding to it right now? Anyone who'd like to answer? Jarret or Dan, Michael, maybe.
Sure, I'll go first on that one. I think, as within so many spaces, going back again to what Dan had said, how quickly from last year to this year the technology has evolved. There's always, especially in the education side, which kind of moves over into the awarding body side, that there's just a natural human lag in those areas. And so when I speak to some individuals, they're still saying like, well, for chemistry and for mathematics, that it's not really that good. So you're absolutely right. Your headspace is probably a couple of months back. It's much better even this week than it was last week. And so that delays, I think, response patterns as well in approaching updates to assessments and updates to security, et cetera. And so my sincere wish is that everyone kind of got on the same speed. Like, I need everyone to start vibe coding something. It could just be like, how do I navigate my calendar? And to just see iteratively how fast the technology really does progress. And I think that would help plan strategically our next steps in kind of the assessment industry. And so that's where I'm still seeing the gap. Some people just are not quite there, or it's they're still doing the same questions. Oh wow, hey, XYZ, what's the weather outside? Like, there's so like seems to be still like the initial question engaging with an LLM, and it's so much deeper and richer, and a lot of areas just haven't gotten beyond those initial like kind of curious questioning to really understand how well or how sophisticated they are. So I would say a lot of the key stakeholders need to align themselves with like an AI futurist or somebody that daily is pushing the envelope for AI and getting that feedback.
That's a great answer, Jarret. Dan, would you like to? What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, so it's again, it's interesting from the talent assessment space because there's been less concern generally about sort of very sort of widespread large scale cheating. It's probably more been this concern about the casual cheaters, and as well always a recognition that there was always sort of acceptance, well, maybe there will be a proportion of people that will cheat, but this typically comes to play as these early stage screening assessments, and these people will go through to an interview and to assessment centres and things like that. So there's an opportunity to sort of pick up on it there. But I think so. I think organisations, when I look at the talent assessment side, probably they're very aware around it, but probably maybe struggling to navigate how to deal with it when the approach has been very much more a trust first policy. So I think it's probably quite different to the credentialing licensing space, where I think the emphasis on test security has always been stronger. So I think organizations are maybe just they're certainly aware of it. They're probably struggling more with how to deal with it and what the approach is, because while I think some are very becoming much more focused on, okay, let's shift to more remote proctoring type models, which have probably been used much more in a minority in the talent assessment space. So while some organizations are doing, I think some feel a little bit reluctant to kind of shift, because it's a change in the narrative to like, we trust you and accept a few of you might cheat, to when you switch to that remote proctoring, it is almost more saying, look, we have to do this because we think a lot more people are going to cheat, and therefore the argument is this about preserving fairness. But that I think there's a sort of reluctance maybe and a concern around how participants will feel if it switches to entirely to remote proctoring. But certainly with the way things are evolving, I can see it that certainly the amount of organizations using remote proctoring compared to the sort of traditional unsupervised testing we've seen, I think it's going to grow.
Thanks, Dan, for this. One follow-up question on that is, a lot of organizations have started reintroducing in-person interviews. Do you think that is the right approach or solution to this pattern now?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, there were typically a face-to-face stage often towards the end, or interviews and things like that. I think it probably means organizations are maybe focusing even more on that and thinking about, well, actually, do you reduce down the amount that you do online unsupervised and actually spend and invest more effort in maybe bringing people in or running interviews and the like. The issue, obviously, that is, I think organisations have got very used to the benefits of high volume screening assessments, and it's a much more expensive route when you do get into sort of interviewing and in-person assessment. So that, I think that's the real struggle that organisations have to balance and decide. What I'm saying is, I think that the organisations maybe sit differently in their sort of risk appetite and how they want to approach it, and some really feel, no, we need to lock this down. There may be particular types of assessment, particular roles, particular groups of candidates. So some want to really lock it down, some kind of still want to try and take more of a trust first approach and use there's various sort of tactics and approaches that can be used to at least mitigate and reduce the risk of cheating. It's never going to eliminate it entirely, but it's about getting it to what we feel is a manageable level. And then at future stages in the recruitment process, you would hope to then start to catch some of these people who've maybe got through unfairly.
Thanks, Dan, for that approach. Michael, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, I think starting from zero trust is important for us online. I think one of the key things for us is that, like, the initial question of what are people missing. I think, I was still talking to people literally last week. It was I was saying, have you used the latest ChatGPT or Copilot? And they're like, it's just still good Google, isn't it? Like, it's just what you use for search. So I think getting that concept that if you start from a point of zero trust and you think that it can do everything, and then when it fails, that's okay. But if you start with that approach that it can do everything, and then what do you do to try and mitigate that? I think the other important thing for me is, the shift to online, people started with it as this is an amazing cost-saving benefit. We can do a million things for a cent each. That's really straightforward. Rather than going, this technology allows us to now test people wherever in the world or interview people anywhere in the world, and it allows us to scale. But you still need humans, and you still need to put effort into it. So stop. I think my big thing for anyone is stop looking at it like a cost-saving mechanism. Look at it as your capability mechanism, this online thing, and put the appropriate resources into it, because people still trip up. They're still humans on the other end. They get bored, they start yawning, the cat walks across and it doesn't, it glitches the wrong way. So I think for me, that's really important. Start with zero trust, but also put the proper resources in it. Train your proctors properly. It's not the same world. That's okay. We just do it in a different way, but we've got the ability. We don't have to rent out hundreds of square meters of floor space to test exams anymore. We can do it anywhere in the world at any time of the day, but you just have to resource it appropriately with a new set of skills with your invigilators and proctors.
Got it. I think all of your inputs lead to one big question for me right now is anyone actually getting this right, or is the whole industry behind and catching up with how AI works today?
That's a loaded question.
At risk of hubris, I think there are plenty of people that get it right. Like, if I look at our pass rates over the last 40 plus years, they're materially the same. So I would be naive to think that no one has got through cheating. Absolutely naive. But do I think that it's rampant? No. We ban literally thousands of people a year. And that's annoying and it's frustrating, and sometimes it's super hilarious when you see someone with an ill-fitting wig. But look, I think there's excellent people out there doing things on a daily basis. I don't think we should go back to handwritten exams or in-person interviews only in one location. I think there's absolutely people getting it right, the right tools.
So I have two final questions for all of you. I think one is similar to what I asked previously. So what is that one thing in the industry or your organizations that we need to either stop doing or start doing that we aren't doing today? Michael, would you like to go for this?
tricky end questions. What should we stop doing? I think if we stop thinking that whatever we've got today is appropriate, and it doesn't mean that we change it tomorrow, but we should always come at it with the concept that we should be willing to change, and that's necessary, not just desired, it's necessary. So I think the status quo, this is what works. I reflect a bit on my previous sector of don't think that online is cheap. Like, you've got to put effort into it and got to put money into it to do it properly. But I think stopping is the status quo. Don't think that your assessment today, we've changed our terms and conditions, I reckon, every 3 months for the last 3 years. And we continually update exam instructions, timing of sessions, how we structure, voices and the like. If you stay static, I think that's a problem. So status quo is the thing that you need to stop, in my opinion.
That's true, Michael. Jarret?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we're now at such a trajectory that we had an individual calling for bi-monthly updates, right? I mean, where we used to talk about 6-month updates, and where we were going, where test security was going, where pre-AI, like what we were doing for things. And so engaging with someone who's not only just potentially I have to say they have to be an expert in AI, but they have to be AI curious or even an AI futurist, right? So working with somebody that is actively looking at trends, where things are going, and how they can benefit the organization, and how they could benefit somebody looking to engage in some level of misconduct. Then continuing to update process. It's an iterative process now, but the cycle for that iteration has become much smaller, almost to the point that it's pretty much just fluid, right? And so looking at where your organization really needs to be in the 3 months, 6 months, 1 year to 5 year kind of future, not just being reactive to the technology, I think is probably the most important thing right now. And it goes kind of across the entire spectrum.
Got it. That's a great take, Jarret. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo that. I mean, obviously, this is going to be a continually changing kind of situation. I mean, I think one of the things that I think I don't see every organisation doing it from the talent assessment perspective, but they should, is to have a really clear and transparent organisational strategy about how they want to approach this challenge in terms of the pre-employment assessments. So being clear about what they would consider appropriate and inappropriate use of AI in the overall hiring process when you look at it holistically, making sure there's a very clear policy statement to candidates, asking candidates to sign up to this, and then designing the hiring process to sort of try and mitigate this impact in doing it. So there's various steps that you can take to reduce the risk. Doesn't eliminate the risk, but more AI resistant formats using honesty agreements, remote proctoring obviously is an option. The threat of random supervisory testing, can dissuade casual cheaters in the sort of pre-employment space, and considering more of these in-person assessment elements. So to me, they have to have be thinking about a clear strategy, what they want their stance to be, how much they want to stay on the trust first versus move to a more security first approach, and design their process to feel like that they're taking a number of steps to mitigate the potential for GenAI cheating. But then to Michael and Jarret's point, to then recognise you can't define that strategy and then leave it for a year, because it's going to be constantly changing and evolving. So it's something that has to be monitored continually and adapted as necessary.
That's right, Dan. So, based on all of our conversations today, I think the key takeaway is that we as an industry need to evolve and move faster in the same space. What would be your call to action for the people watching this today?
I think for me, I just echo, I suppose, the point I just made is for organisations in the talent who are looking at their talent assessment, they need to have a clear policy and strategy, and they can consult with organisations like we do at Talogy to sort of define how they want to approach it, and it's okay to maybe choose different stances depending on the nature of the roles you're recruiting for or on the approach. I think from the test providers side, I think it is that one of the main call to action is about evolving and thinking about some of these new assessment formats where you can actually embrace the use of GenAI, and then it starts to remove this question about GenAI cheating, sort of part of that, because then you're actually looking at how can we assess someone's capabilities, and in an ideal world, to still assess their problem-solving capabilities and the key skills that you want to measure, but recognizing that a lot of those things in many roles will be done with GenAI in future when people are actually in the job.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that because I really think it's very important right now to be thinking outside the box, and I think it's perfectly fine to think outside the box with AI, right? And to have a strategy and kind of go forward. There's a lot of conversation right now on the assessment side of, one trajectory is perhaps we can just generate on-demand items at all times. And so then we're never really worried about the security aspect if no one ever sees. And that's getting a lot of traction. I can understand some of it. But at the same point, if we're also saying that agentic AI can answer any questions, it doesn't really matter how many questions we generate if that's way that they're getting away with it. So I almost envision, and this is just me, I'll put on my own personal hat, as we go forward, I almost can see individuals engaging in an educational space or working through a recertification, literally being handed their own agent that is constantly going to be assessing what they know, what they don't know, and will be generating in real time bespoke assessments based on your current knowledge base and what you're lacking from almost like a real world perspective. This chapter is particularly on organic chemistry, right? How much have you demonstrated over the last week that you truly know about that? How much are you lacking if you're fully going to master this area? And the agent's assessing everything you do. And so your actual assessment will be completely unlike anyone else's. And that bespoke aspect could be tapped into, frankly, now. And I think we'll see larger conversations as psychometricians get involved and as the data scientists get involved about what that could look like in the future.
Thanks, Jarret. Michael?
I'll keep it short. Don't give up on it, but constantly evolve. I think invest and constantly evolve. That's my call to action.
That's great. I think I loved hearing from all of you. Thank you, Jarret, Michael, and Dan. I think this has been a very important conversation, especially from my standpoint as well, given that this is the problem that we are trying to solve for every day as part of our jobs. I think what strikes today for me is that it's not about only technology, it's also about trust at the end of the day. And that's where Talview is also continuously working towards making sure how we can evolve and how we can ensure that we are ahead of these patterns and are able to identify these scenarios. We have our own 7-layer security framework that doesn't just flag moments, but it's also able to read patterns. It's able to monitor environments and track content leakage across the web. These tools exist. It's just now that the question is whether the industry will move fast enough to use them. So that is my takeaway as well. Thank you, everyone, for taking our time today. Really,
Thank you so much. Thank you.